Let's start with coding the insert method so that we can add data to our task database. Our end goal for implementing this function is to hook it up to our Add Task Activity UI, so that when a user types in a new task with a selected priority and clicks the Add button, this will insert that newly created data into our task database. One thing that the provider will do differently than straight-up SQL code is to have different actions for different URIs. In this way, it can do some simple data validation by making sure it only responds to valid URIs. When you insert data, you'll be inserting a new row of data into the entire tasks directory, which holds all of our existing data. So, you'll want your content provider to respond only to the URI that identifies that directory. And to handle this case, you'll use your URI matcher and a switch statement. So that we can write new data to it, we'll use mtaskdbhelper.getWritable_database, and we'll be using this throughout this function, so I'm declaring it as a final variable named db. This match will be either 100 for all tasks, or 101 for a task with ID, or an unrecognized URI, and we want to check these cases with a switch case and respond to only the tasks case. If the tasks case is met, we can insert a new row of data into this directory. We can't insert data into just one row, like in the task with ID case, and if we receive any other type of URI or an invalid one, the default behavior will be to throw an unsupported operation exception and print out an unknown URI message. Now let's actually fill in the code for this directory case. First, we know this method returns a URI. So let's create a variable to store that, named returnURI. We'll declare this right above our switch case so that we can assign it a value later on in the directory case. Then, in the tasks case, we'll insert new data into the tasks directory by calling insert on our database. We just say db.insert and pass in our table name and our content values. And this may look familiar from the waitlist app you've coded before. This insert should return an integer ID. If the insert wasn't successful, this ID will be -1. But if the insert is successful, we want the provider's insert method to take that unique row ID and create and return a URI for that newly inserted data. So first, let's write an if that checks that this insert was successful. So if ID greater than 0 will work. That means the insert worked and we can construct the new URI. Otherwise, we'll throw a SQLite exception because the insert failed. So if the ID is valid, then the URI we construct will be our main content URI, which has the authority and tasks path with the ID appended to it. And we can do that using content_URIs.withAppendedID and passing in our main content URI and this new row ID. Content URIs is an Android class that contains helper methods for constructing URIs. And this method creates a URI starting with this first argument as a base and then with this ID added on to the end of the path. And we're storing this as the value for our returnURI variable. Then, at the end of our switch statement, we can return that URI. And don't forget to delete the not yet implemented exception. And we're almost done. One last thing, right before this return statement, you'll also notify the resolver that a change has occurred at this particular URI. You'll do this using the notifyChange function. This is so that the resolver knows that something has changed and can update the database and any associated UI accordingly. Phew, that was a lot of little steps, but now we have a complete insert function, and the next step will be to actually call this from the UI code.